I'm with Gershem from Operation Mobilisation. Now, Gershem, what is Operation Mobilisation?
Well, Operation Mobilisation is actually a movement that started back in the 1950s, and the goal was to try to get young people as minimally trained as possible so that they could get out as quickly as possible to the neediest places in the world for the gospel.
Now, you're based here in Tiberias. How did you get involved in Operation Mobilisation?
I actually had loved the organization when I was in Bible college, but it just never seemed to work out. I was actually here in Israel for 6 or 7 years before I got married, and my wife and I decided that it was the best fit for us ministry-wise.
So you were a single guy when you came here, and eventually when you came to Tiberias, you were married?
Well, I came to Tiberias as a single, and I met my wife in the local Messianic fellowship here. I'd already been here for, 6 or 7 years and had various types of visas. And because I'm not Jewish, my future here was very tenuous. But since I got married, it's become much easier.
Now, you were based here in Tiberias. Tell us a little bit about Tiberias, the history of Tiberias.
Tiberias is one of the 4 holy cities of Judaism. But in the days of Jesus, it was a brand new city, built and finished by Herod Antipas, and named after the Roman emperor at the time, Tiberius. And history rumors that it was built on a Canaanite-era graveyard. Tiberias is actually framed by 2 cities from the time of Joshua. On the south is Hamat, and on the north side, Rakat. And you can still see ruins in both places. But Tiberias was shunned by Jewish people until a good 150 years after the destruction of the temple, when it actually became the new seat of the reconstituted Sanhedrin. Jews were forbidden to live in Jerusalem after the Second Rebellion, and Tiberias became the place where the religious leaders chose to establish themselves.
And there are many, many rabbis buried here?
Yes, I like to say tongue-in-cheek that we have more famous dead rabbis here than anywhere else. Akiva is buried here, Rambam, Maimonides, Rabbi Baal Hanes, and others.
Now, Tiberias is on the Sea of Galilee, and this is where Jesus done most of his ministry, isn't it?
At least nearby. Probably he had nothing to do with Tiberias as a Roman pagan city. But yes, we're very close to the sites where the biblical events in the New Testament took place.
And how big is the Christian community here in Tiberias?
It's actually quite large per capita. In fact, there's a community not far from here that probably has the second highest proportion of believers anywhere in the country. And there are 4 or 5 congregations right here in the Tiberias area. We like to play a game every time we go to town, my wife and I. It's Count the Believers, and rarely do we ever make a trip to Tiberias without encountering at least 1 or 2 believers that we know.
Are they a very small, tight-knit community? Does everybody know everybody?
Actually, no. It's grown so much, and there's so many new believers that we don't know everybody anymore. I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah. So do you actually feel like God is actually doing something here in Tiberias?
Oh, absolutely. I remember when I started attending our fellowship years ago that they never even gave an invitation. And probably already for a decade, that's the norm. At the end of the message, an invitation is given. And more often than not, somebody responds publicly.
What is your congregation and how was that started?
The Peniel Fellowship is over 30 years old and was indigenous, meaning that it was established by a group of local people without any outside influence or denomination. And it has grown steadily over the years. We're now in our own building in Upper Tiberias, and we really need a bigger facility. We've been praying for a number of years.
So is your congregation, the majority of them, local believers rather than tourists or people who've came to volunteer in the land?
Yes, I would say that fully 75 to 80% of our people are permanent here in the land. So I think it's safe to say that we're the largest indigenous congregation in Israel.
And what sort of needs do the people have here in the congregation?
Well, a lot of people are new immigrants, so to find good work is not so easy in this area. Tiberias is in what's called the periphery, or the boondocks, as we say in American English. And yeah, the jobs are not really high paying, so that's probably the biggest challenge. A lot of our people don't have cars and rely on the fellowship to organize transportation to bring them to the meetings.
And what's the spiritual climate like here in Tiberias?
Well, the city is becoming more and more religious, and I'm not sure, but I would venture to guess that the population here could be over half ultra-Orthodox now. So that makes kind of a heavy atmosphere for people. And we have to be very careful about evangelistic work because there are sharp reactions from people.
Are you able to actually evangelize here?
Yeah, we do as best we can. There's certain areas where it's a little freer, like the waterfront in Tiberias. And we do a lot of literature work. OM has always been about literature. And we try to have conversations with people in a discreet way. We try not to be too in your face, but the Lord has been bringing groups to help us for the better part of a decade now. So we employ them in every conceivable fashion for evangelism.
What sort of programs do you actually run here in Tiberias with OM?
Well, like I said, literature is very key. So we're regularly doing evangelistic work through literature distribution, both anonymously and in a public way. We try to have public outreaches on the waterfront, as I mentioned, because it's an area where there's very little opposition. And then in the region around Tiberias, there are lots of more secular or less religious communities, and we've had very good success there in conversations with people.
How is the response to people, especially when you say, oh, you're a believer in Jesus?
Well, the reaction can run the whole spectrum, whether you're talking to somebody who's very religious or somebody who's very secular and humanistic. And most people are somewhat polite. But, of course, there are those that react sharply. Just recently we had a group from Singapore, and one young lady started talking to a religious woman who seemed very friendly until the girl presented her a tract, and then ugly face came over her, and she got very nasty and ripped it up and tried to take her whole bag of literature.
Have you had any responses in a positive way as well?
Yes, praise God. There's one little old lady on a kibbutz in the area. We've been sending team after team to her because she's so open and so delighted to have visitors. I think we just sent the 37th team to visit her recently.
And what's the most important way to evangelize or to speak into the hearts and lives of Jewish people?
Well, I think the most important job that we as believers in Jesus have is to point people towards their own scriptures, because all of the information about the Messiah is clearly there. So anytime we can get them to accept the scriptures, including the New Testament, or to engage with the scriptures perhaps through a website or other material, we already think that's a very positive step. Of course, we like to raise questions, especially about the Messiah. Who was he to be? When was he to come? What is he to do? And if we can at least plant these questions in people's heads, we've already succeeded in doing a lot.
Do Orthodox Jews actually read the Old Testament and know it very well, or do they read other books about other rabbis and things like that?
Well, that's a great question. My wife has a cousin who became religious in his adulthood and now studies in a yeshiva all the time. And we asked him about that. And he admitted that rarely are they actually studying the books of the Bible in the yeshiva. Mostly they're studying the oral law, the Talmud, and other writings. And that's sad to me. Even people that know the scriptures fairly well don't regularly read them, at least the portions that aren't read in the synagogue throughout the year.
So they wouldn't know that their Messiah was going to be born in Bethlehem?
Well, that's a good point. I remember picking up a condensed portion of scriptures that the army distributes to soldiers, and I could find none of the key messianic references in there, not one of them.
So it's important to point Orthodox Jews back to their own scriptures and repeat scriptures about the Messiah.
Exactly. It's their book, it's their material, it's their Messiah. And many times they're just not looking in the right place.
Why do you do what you do?
Why do I do what I do? Because I'm burdened for the people here. I believe very much in Romans 1:16, which says to the Jew first. I believe that's an imperative for the church also today, that we have a high responsibility to the Jewish people to bring the gospel message to them, even though, as some have suggested, they may be the most overly evangelized people group on the face of the earth.
And what's your prayer for Tiberias?
My prayer for Tiberias is that people will really open up and come out of their religious cage. We have a program called SWIFT, the Strategic Worship Initiative for Tiberias. And we believe that this is what the Lord has shown us to prepare the ground. And I have no idea when there will be a sea change, but I believe it will come, probably suddenly.
So big things are going to happen in Tiberias.
I believe so. I believe that's what the Lord has shared with us.
Well, Gershem, thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.